there. And we also have a screen. And so I think they're setting it up, and then we'll be able to show some of this, or we can just fellowship, which I would love to do. We're going to have a discussion about World Trade Center 7. And also, we want to show a short clip, a portion. What Richard Gage and the 8911 Truth people did was they also interviewed the psychologists that signed the petition. There are many professional psychologists who signed the petition, and they interviewed some of them. And they're entering that phase of 9/11 truth where we're starting to recognize, hey, what happened? Why do people deny this kind of science? So we want to share that with you and also the family members. But we're going to have a discussion. We have Arthur Moakley. We also have a gentleman who has appeared in this film, an engineer of 40 years experience. He's president of his own engineering company. And he was kind enough to show up this morning at our courthouse to go and stand in the sun and pass out literature to people on the street. So along with Arthur Moakley, we have Mr. Rick Foltz. And they will answer your questions. If you are an architect or an engineer or a related professional and you have a question, please identify yourself. If you're a pilot, if you're, I think we have Russell Wittenberg here.
Yeah.
Please stand up. We've got some professionals here. Please stand up. Fast forward us to, if you like. And if you have any questions or comments about this film, please feel free to ask these guys. Yeah, you can just stand in the middle here. Okay?
Well, one of the things that I think we were all kind of anticipating in the discussion was the conclusions that these engineers are drawing. And also, I think we all really want to know what's next. What are we going to do? What's the course of action? How do we address this? And I think that they do get into some of those observations and draw some conclusions. But perhaps some of the gentlemen who are here with us today can just give us some idea. When we talk about an investigation, they mentioned several different modes of investigating. What would you recommend? I mean, how do we proceed?
Well, the government has destroyed most of the evidence, so it's pretty hard, other than getting people under oath and drilling them and seeing, trying to find out the truth. But I'd just like to make a comment. I'm a retired airline captain. I was with United Airlines, and I was also with Pan American World Airways and the Vietnam Air Force pilot. And I was kind of fortunate or unfortunate enough to have flown pilot and command on both of the actual United aircraft which were involved in that. It's during my logbook multiple times. I flew the airplane which hit the South Tower and the airplane which allegedly went down to Shanksville. And I got involved in the 9/11 truth movement very soon after the event happened. By kind of like by accident. Myself and 3 other guys started the 9/11 Truth Movement. I'm a member of the Pilots for 9/11 Truth, just like the architects and engineers. And we covered a lot of evidence that if you think this story gives a lot of glaring errors, you ought to see the aviation of it. Because it is truly, the government's story on the aviation part of it is just one gigantic fairy tale after another. Yes, there's any question back there?
I'm not an engineer, I'm not a pilot, I'm an architect. But I've been around planes all my life. My dad was like you, a career pilot. We talked, and he finds it hard to believe that all 4 of these big airplanes just completely vaporized.
Yeah.
I mean, they all, that plane that blew up over Lockerbie, Scotland, there was plenty of debris.
Yeah, well, one thing we do as airline captains, we get training twice a year. One 6-month check is the B check, and that's training, and the A check is in fact a check ride. And it's about a 4 or 5 day session. And one of the things we do is that we go over all of the airplanes that have crashed since the last time we were there, and we go over it in detail because they don't want us making the same mistakes that these guys made ahead of us. And so I think I've seen every major crash site that's happened in the last 30-some years in detailed pictures, which you will never see in the newspaper, because we go in quite detail. And I never say never, and I never say always, but I've never seen a major crash site where you don't have huge remnants of the airplane left over somehow.
Like the wing shearing off.
Like the tail engines. You cannot make the airplane go fast enough to destroy things like landing gear, brakes, tires, engines are made out of titanium alloy.
Jet fuel doesn't burn hot enough to fry a turbine, otherwise a jet wouldn't fly.
Yeah, well, one of the things they did, one of the government's fairy tale that they have is they have the airplane doing 530 statute miles per hour as they hit the various buildings. Now, to the
That's awful
the
fast.
average layman, that sounds fairly reasonable, but there's only one problem with it. We don't use statute miles an hour, we use nautical. So if you convert 530 to knots, that's 460 nautical miles per hour, which is exactly 110 knots over max design limit speed of the airplane. Now, what we have going here is that everything has an optimum drag coefficient. Cars, trucks, airplanes, and it's the lift over drag. And so the optimum lift over drag that we call VY, or best rate of climb speed. And so when you start exceeding the best rate of climb speed, drag increases to the square of the velocity. And so that it goes up exponentially. And so to have a drag factor increase of 110 knots over your VY airspeed, the wings would come off before the airplane, they literally come out of the sky because of the high impact profile of drag. And so they have the airplane come in and say, for example, the Pentagon, and doing 110 knots over the max design limit speed, or VMO, and they have this guy who has never flown an airplane in his life, doing they quote 5, 6, 7 G turns, which the airplane is stressed for 2.5 positive and 1 negative G. And so what would happen, a high-speed buffet, the airplane would literally fall out of the sky. I mean, literally fall out of the sky, because there's no lift over due to the shock waves forming over the trailing edge of the top of the trailing edge of the wings and dampening out the aft horizontal stabilizer in an elevator. Now they got for example, at the Pentagon, one of the reasons they used the people who wrote up the fairy tale of how these airplanes came in. The reason they had them going so fast is because number one, they were fairy tale tellers, they weren't pilots, and so they said, well, we got to make the airplanes to go fast enough so that when the airplane hits the buildings of the Pentagon, there won't be anything left. It's going to vaporize. Well, you can't make the airplanes vaporize. You can't make them go that fast. And so, then they say, well, they put it on autopilot. There's all kinds of things that they've said that, well, now, the autopilots are designed so that these guys may be a bunch of ham and eggers. They couldn't solve an assessment. But they said, well, they put it on autopilot. Well, the autopilot won't exceed, and all the throttles won't exceed the max design limit speeds of the airplane. So every time you turn around, they catch themselves in their own set of lies.
I would like to ask you a question also not from an engineering standpoint or aeronautical standpoint, but my advice is, yes, we've seen the evidence is destroyed. The government's covered up the evidence. But tell your children, tell your sons, tell your daughters, tell your parents that the government story is a big lie, that we are not being told the truth. Cry out for the truth. That's what we can do. Even though the evidence is gone, we can still investigate the investigators.
Yeah.
That's what we need to do.
Criminals.
Subpoena power, we need to investigate the investigators. And who gave the marching orders to come up with this cock and bull, lie?
That's
And
literally,
what do you do when they tell you to shut up, that you're crazy, and that they had friends who died in the Pentagon, in the
Yes.
plant in the Pentagon?
Talk
You know,
loud.
I would like to address that, actually, and I want to encourage everyone to please go to ae911truths.org, purchase this film, purchase their products. It is so easy. You don't have to leave your desk. You can serve this work and support the professionals who are putting themselves at risk, their careers, their reputations, coming forward. And to answer doubters, all we need is this film. Make a list of the professionals that appear in this film. And, point that out to people. The word needs to get out. But see, they took it to the next level for what the statement you just made. They interviewed psychologists. And there are all sorts of psychological and brain chemistry, all sorts of things that are happening that cause people to not be able to handle this kind of information. And for some, that can go untold. So purchase the film and the products. Okay.
just another point on this Building 7 again. The reason the emphasis is on Building 7 is because it was so clear, it was so radiantly clear that what was said about how that building collapsed, which was not hit by a plane, which we all see just drop into thin air. This is something that is, from a legal standpoint, easier to grab hold to reemphasize. I've been telling people for 10 years, what about Building 7? They say whatever they want. I said, what about Building 7? Explain to me Building 7. Explain to me how and no one wants to deal with that issue. So again, if you start with something that you can prove and that you can essentially use as a entry point to combat, then that makes it a little easier. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my question is, who is behind mainly beyond what we can see, and what are the reasons to do that? Because we just have suspects, but I don't know if there is something.
We can stay here. We can be here all night with conjecture, and I think we really want to stay away from doing that. These scientists and engineers dedicated all of this time to prove facts and to address issues from a very scientific standpoint. And we really have to stick with the science. If we get off into trying to ask why and trying to who did this or that.
Investigation that's.
Because I know that the American people have the right to know the real truth, the truth.
Yep.
So, not just to know how they did it, but who's behind it.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
that's what the investigation,
That's the answer.
we have to get to that stage. And it's so important to not speculate, to stay with the facts, the science and the evidence, so that we can one day, we may even have an international investigation that transcends what we have here in this country.
There's a call for it.
I'm a lawyer.
Let's put
I'm a lawyer. And I'll tell you,
Lawyer.
if you want to prove that a prosecutor, that a federal public defender, if you want to prove who did something, first you determine the mode of committing the crime. Then
War.
you determine who would have access to those.
Cheney.
This clearly would require the use of high technology, access to the building, and I always wanted to ask Larry Silverstein, when you said you pull it, had you ever told your tenants that you had the capacity to pull it? Did you, so access to the tools, and so you're almost there actually in finding the type of perpetrator. We're almost there, actually.
We're going to get to the questions. Hang on a second.
State crime.
I got two questions actually, along both lines. First, how long does it take to plant explosives in a 47-story building?
Months.
Oh, yes. Well, I heard something a couple days ago, someone said, well, if you have a large enough team, it could be done in one day. Now that, I don't
No way.
Can't, even with a large enough team, it would take more than one day.
A team that large would be noticed.
They would have been noticed coming out of the building.
The other question is, okay, if it wasn't anyone in the U.S., if it wasn't any organization in the U.S., what worldwide or other kind of international organization
Mossad.
has the capability or just the manpower and the ability to do this? I mean, if it's not U.S., and I assume that this is not a U.S. organization that planned these things. So what other organizations are there?
All the research I have done, you have to ask yourself, who benefits?
Yes.
What country in the world benefits?
Israel.
You have your own opinion, but the facts show us that one country benefits. And that's another, all gets a discussion all in itself.
It doesn't have to be one country, actually. It could be an
No,
organization.
it doesn't, because the United States certainly didn't benefit.
But we'd have to be the ones covering it up. I mean, our agencies.
Our government is covering
This man said
at the very least.
in a
If we can
while.
find the perpetrator, how can we expect
Well, sir, did
Water
you
reporting.
did you ever hear?
Black boxes from the airplanes, and have you seen Jesse Ventura's investigation? And what's your opinion on that?
Well, actually, the black boxes are really orange, but they just call them black. And flight data recorders and cockpit voice recorders. You cannot make the airplane go fast enough to destroy it. Okay, they're built to sustain like 26,000 Gs or something like that. And so all of the, what the pilots from 9/11 Truth did, through the Freedom of Information Act, we finally received the flight data recorder from Flight 77, one with the Pentagon. And we ran it through a computer and into a flight simulator, and we have the entire flight profile of Flight 77 from takeoff to the point where it crashed in real time. And so that's where we found out what these maneuvers where they tried to pull with these people who couldn't even solo a Cessna 172. I mean, that's you know, it's ludicrous on its face to ask a guy who couldn't solo a Cessna. It's like asking, showing me how to carve up a Christmas turkey and say, okay, Russ, go ahead and make a heart transplant. I mean, I couldn't do it. And to throw it, these people who just wouldn't even solo, the instructors wouldn't sign them off to solo, is ludicrous. And they're flying these 757s and 67s better than I could fly.
We know a lot of people have questions. We only got about 10 minutes or so with the room. They just didn't give us a lot of time. Let's go all the way to the back of the gentleman in blue.
I just had a quick question as a pilot. Would you entertain the theory that perhaps some of the planes were in fact not planes? For instance, at the Pentagon, and if that's the case, where are those planes? And that's always been something that I've just kind of haunted me about this. Even in Shanksville, you know, the small hole that they found and said that was Flight 93 doesn't fly either. They didn't find, there was nothing left. I mean, you never see, you know, I've seen photos of crashes before, and it, yeah, I mean, it's just.
Well, once this investigation starts unraveling, I think we're going to be able to get to a lot of those things, and we will get to them. It may take some time, but we will get to them. And we'll get to them because people like you continue to spread what you come and share. And you know, we'll get there by critical mass. I really am excited that so many people came out. I want to get to some questions that I know the attorney is here. That's good.
Excuse me, I'm a certified safety professional. I've been in the business for 32 years, and then we're seeing a lot of collateral damage as far as from a health standpoint, firefighters and others. And most people don't realize that federal OSHA went in there to tell them to wear a specific type of mask to prevent themselves from being exposed. And federal OSHA was told back off.
Yeah.
They were going to fine them, they were going to do all kinds of things to the city of New York because the firefighters and others not wearing.
3,000 people died that day, and there have been more than 10,000 people that have died as a result of
Collateral damage?
Since.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
I want to ask something, or maybe say something to the engineer. He said something that we should tell our sons, our nephews, everybody about it.
Yes.
I want to ask you, what happened when the United States made sent the Lusitania ship to be sunk by the Germans so the United States can get into the war? Who made the investigation? When Pearl Harbor to get into the war, who made the investigation of that? And then when we went into, you just mentioned, to Vietnam, who made that investigation? And this is the same pattern that's being used over and over, killing Americans just to get involved into some type of war.
And again, we're gonna speculate a lot. You agree?
Since we're talking about Building 7 a lot, I was curious if any of you guys knew what offices were in Building 7, because I always thought that that means, that would be a reason to demolish it. And then I'm also, the second thing that I read on the internet recently was the theory that potentially something went wrong and that Tower 7 was supposed to collapse earlier, which is why there was foreknowledge to the BBC when they announced 30 minutes before that it was going to collapse. So yeah, I was just curious, if you knew what specifically was in the building, and if you heard anything about the dud theory.
Yes.
What was in the building?
CIA headquarters, New York City was the second largest CIA.
Julian's headquarters, SEC, there were a bunch of offices. But it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter what was in the buildings. Because what I'm saying, the entire complex was supposed to be demolished, essentially. I mean, everything else was torn up except for Building 7, and then Building 7 rocked. So Building 7 was the only piece left to have any kind of investigation around, and that's what we're focusing on Building 7. What happened? How did Building 7 just drop out of the sky like that? Now I think if we can start to get some answers on that, then we can start to ask questions about the rest of the complex. We can start to ask questions about the planes. We can start to ask questions about the whole matter. But we've got to start somewhere from a legal standpoint. You said, Rick?
I've thought about it a lot. What does it mean when the highest judge is the highest criminal, or some aspect of that, at the very least? Those are really. It's so touching to really see all you guys out here. I want to echo that. It really is. It's a big deal. And a little younger than the rest of the crowd, but I'm really glad you guys came. One last idea, at least for me. Emotions versus facts, In the end, as a human species, in that human journey, it seems emotions are very powerful and it can really lead away from facts. And you guys are here today representing that facts and taking that approach of science and looking at those things that are irrefutable. Most of those people, look at Bob Bowman, look at all of those guys and ladies, they're pointing out how obvious it is, right? It's not that it isn't obvious, I think it's that it's very difficult, but I think we're reaching that hump now. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment about on September 10th, there was $2.3 trillion that was unaccounted for, announcement made by Rumsfeld, and the part, 2.3 trillion with a T. Anyway, the interesting thing is the part of the Pentagon that was hit was the accounting department.
Let's talk about the elevator. Question is, how did Stokes got in there, and the attorney brought this up about, it had to be somebody with access. I don't know where I heard this, it was a radio talk show, Alex Jones or whatever, but somebody said that 9 months before September 11th, there was an elevator company, I think Ace Elevator Company, which was renovating the elevator system at night. and they had access to all of the 4 major beams holding up the buildings.
And surveillance was turned off. And surveillance.
Weekend before,
During the work.
The lady here, the lady.
Who had the authority to order everything to be hauled to China? Because that same trucking company also hauled the destruction of the Mirror building out of Oklahoma City.
That's a mistake.
Yeah. Who had the authority to authorize that?
Yeah, again, does anybody wants to answer that question?
I think it was Giuliani.
No, very specifically, it had to come from a higher authority than Giuliani. If you know, who actually had the authority to order that material removed and sold to China?
Bush.
So Sherwood.
Bush.
Okay, so, but I'm saying, these are the kinds of things we can find out quickly in an investigation, so that's why we're heading this direction. You in the red, sir.
Oh, I just want to say, I mean, all it took for me is I didn't even know about Building 7 when I watched the Silverstein clip. I just didn't pull it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, that's a controlled demolition. And in my mind, I figured, well, that was some other building that, you know, they just needed to pull, right? I had no idea that the guy, like, tried to go later on say that it meant pull the firefighters, and that he wasn't even talking about it.
Right.
I mean, the first thing that came to my head was control.
Yeah, I sat there in shock and saw him say that too.
And
I have another, my wife said next to me, like, how do you convince people? One of the things that I personally found convincing was the fact that over 300 firefighters marched into buildings 1 and 2. And the reason they did so was explained by one of the firemen who said, we were always taught that this is perfectly safe to do, except that you don't want to get hit by the smoke or by the fire. That's why they go up the stairs, they don't go up the elevator. And so the fact that 300 firefighters were in there is evidence that they, after a lifetime of training, had absorbed the belief that a skyscraper does not collapse.
My wife and I were in shock, and she said while we were watching, she said, the building's gonna fall. I said, that's crazy. Buildings don't fall. I mean, I would have got killed.
But you could almost feel it.
Yeah.
It was weird.
Yeah.
Well, I had to step outside, but was anyone in the building when it caught on fire or around it? Or were they evacuated?
Was Barry Jennings in 7?
Google Barry Jennings uncut on YouTube.
Yeah.
He was a witness, he died mysteriously, he talks about Building 7, he was trapped in there. He was, does anyone remember what his role was? He worked at Building 7?
I know all about it. Barry Jennings' testimony proves that they brought all those 3 buildings down at the same time. The explosions were going on before World Trade Center 2 fell. He watched World Trade Center 2 fall from inside World Trade Center 7.
He was in Building 7.
While explosions were going on all around him, and a lot of people died contrary to
He
the
said he
official
saw
story.
bodies, he said that the lobbies were blown out. The basements, I believe he testified before the 9/11 Commission, and his testimony was omitted. It was omitted.
Well,
And so you can see that.
There certainly has been a wide effort to cover the tracks of each one of these issues that we bring up. And certainly, you know, we can talk about buildings 1 and 2 that were hit by the planes, and we can talk about flights, and we can, you know, but they've covered those issues fairly well in terms of just stratospherically, but certainly not in any detail, not with any comfort, or not with any facts. But Building 7 stands out and is very glaring in something that went wrong that day, something somebody missed. The gentleman in black.
I know of no one that likes to be accused of something that they did not do. Can we reasonably deduce that we don't know who it was yet, but can we say who we think it wasn't? The people that were accused of doing this, I don't see them having the technology or the sophistication to pull something like this off. If all of this, you know what I'm saying? I think Americans are pretty smart with it. Worldwide, we know a lot more now than we did 10, 20 years ago. So with all of the glaring evidence that we have in front of us, people on the other side of the world with a lot less sophistication, I don't think they could pull something like this off.
Well, certainly they didn't have access, and
Yeah.
this is what we're concerned with. Who had access to the building, and you know, again, if the other thing that came out in the report a few months ago was a conclusive report that there were explosives. The explosives were found, evidence of explosives were found all over the entire area. And more specifically, nanothermite, there is just an abundance of evidence that there were explosives. But again, this didn't think to investigate whether or not explosives were there or used or any of that. And so that's why we need a new investigation. We need a more comprehensive one. Even today, there's still evidence. We got a piece of supposedly the building from 9/11 over at the state capitol. You know, go over and take a swab, and I bet you'll find thermite.
Whenever you get into a discussion of means and the motives and the access to get something like this done, the discussion then proceeds to, well, how many people would have to be involved in some kind of cover-up? And the other side always says, oh, we take thousands and thousands of people, and you just can't keep people quiet like that. So I'd like to ask the panel, what is your response to that question?
Well, they've done a pretty good job of keeping people
Yeah.
through all types of intimidation, threats. I mean, if you don't go along with the party line, you know, this is going to happen to you, or you're going to lose your job, or you're going to be audited by the IRS. There's lots of ways to keep people from stepping forward, and if it's nothing more than peer pressure, because people don't like to stand up in front of groups of people and say, hey, I don't think these buildings came down the way the government said they do, because people laugh at them. And let me tell you something, we started this truth movement 10 years ago, right after the building, and I'll guarantee you, when all the jingoism was being thought of as patriotism, and people running around with flags, and I was up there saying, hey folks, hold on, it didn't happen this way. I wasn't a very popular guy. And if I lost a lot of so-called friends, and I'm glad I lost them because
they weren't your friends.
If you lost them, they weren't your friends. That's right.
Well, again, critical mass is important, and critical mass comes with understanding and information. And if we can arm you with information, then you can, again, allow us to spread this effort so that people won't be isolated and they won't feel like they can't say anything. We can't just let the Tea Party be the only group that runs around saying we want to take our country back. You know, there's some serious undertones to that statement.
Yes. Just a comment, I'm a civil engineer, regarding the strategy of all of this, and thank you guys that have worked on this for so long. I don't know what kind of pushback there has or hasn't been, but if there hasn't been any, there will be. And you brought up the Tea Party, I just want to mention the strength of the Tea Party is the same thing that's the strength of this group. As soon as you take a 9/11 AE, a couple of people, and say, these guys are in the charge, they're the racehorse at the top, it's pretty easy to destroy that entire movement. The strength of this group and this movement is in all of us. We cannot allow just a couple of people to spearhead this and be the only ones standing at the front, because they're going to get taken down, okay? But between the press and everything else. The other comment I have strategically is that the people that did this, regardless who it was, are not stupid people. They're very evil people. This is not a Democrat-Republican thing. This isn't even an Islam, Christian thing or anything like that, okay? My opinion follow the money, but my point is this. The number one weapon that these people use to do the things that they do is to get us to go, Bush did it, Cheney did it,
Osama bin Laden did it.
Bin Laden did it. That's all garbage, and it's a waste of time.
Dividing Congress.
It's a waste of time. Don't get, you said it the best,
stay to the facts. Facts are inarguable. Thermite is inarguable. Gravity is inarguable, even in New York City, to the surprise of conjecture and blame, that'll come. But if this movement goes there now, it ain't going anywhere. It's real easy to shoot down.
It's certainly there are going to be people who are going to try to draw us in those directions, and I think it's a very important point that we resist at all costs the efforts to try and pull people in that direction. So, sir, the next guy next to you does. You in the black? Did you have a question? Okay.
I just had a quick question about the 10th anniversary. I'm sure we all know that they're not allowing the first responders.
Yeah, yes.
What's the reason? Well, they're saying there's not enough room, and they only allow the families of victims. So apparently the first responders are going to build an equal human.
Well, that dovetails us to the next segment that we wanted to show, which was about the psychology and also about.
So I'm wondering if the force is going to be larger this year, or what?
Well, there are a lot of victims and families that are a part of this story and part of this this presentation. So do pick it up and support the cause, and take the information. It will be very helpful to you. And armed with, again, this information, you then can become an advocate and help spread the message.
How hard then, if we're going to stick to the facts, is it really going to be based on all the knowledge we have from experts to prove unequivocally that this thing was,
First of all, you have to have a motive. Remember the old dragnet? Just the facts, there's always a motive. Go home on your computer and Google PNAC, Project for a New American Century. And there you're going to find out who has the motive. You look it up. PNAC, Project for a New American Century. If it's still up there.
It's there.
Well, again, I'd just like to defer to our attorney as we're going to wrap up here because we kind of run out of time. What did you think about, just from a legal standpoint, the process of moving forward? I mean, they're asking for a judicial investigation. They're asking for a congressional investigation. They're asking for an international investigation. The architects are moving in that direction. We want Building 7 investigated from whatever direction you can get it investigated.
Personally, I would say that indeed the families of the victims are probably your spearhead. If I was to say strategically, how do you penetrate the resistance of the media and the resistance that has been erected by the fathers of the country standing in resistance to the truth, I would say, is people who say we have a right to know how our loved ones died, were victims, and we have a right to know who financed it. I think it is absolutely inconceivable that something like this could have been done without, like I said, access, technical ability, and of course that all adds up to a lot of money. But I think that they're the detonator from the emotional perspective. We're talking about the emotion, to make emotion work for us in this situation. The cry of the injured is an emotional detonator. But if you talk about what is the explosive charge, it's all those witnesses, all those expert witnesses who have already thrown their hat in the ring. And that is very, very moving for me because in our society, we trust the word of an engineer, right?
I just want to say that 9/11 Commission report wasn't worth the paper it was written on. Serious, it would be a joke, just like the Warren Commission report. If Omar shot John F. Kennedy the night, he was the patsy and the fall guy. Just like Admiral Kimmel and General Sharp were the fall guys in Pearl Harbor. And there's always a fall guy. And in the case of 9/11, it's these so-called AWAB guys. They were just pawns. Well, we've got a little bit more of the film that we said, I guess we've got a little bit of the extension of the time. We wanted to share a little bit of the interviews with the families and a few psychologists, and then we'll adjourn after that and head over to the guys.
And let's give our professionals a... some of the interviews with the psychologists and the families. And I think when this ends, we're just going to close these couple of times. The Toronto hearings are happening. I think they're either going on right now or they're going to dovetail over 9/11. Google the Toronto hearings. Richard Gage will be at the Toronto hearings. A lot of other great people will be there. Okay, so we want to keep up on those hearings and what's happening there. And I hope that we see all of you at the IO. So thanks for coming.
General site,
We'll see if we can
Town of
get
Arizona, which has been for the past 20 years. I hold a master's level certification in NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. So it doesn't work to challenge people's belief or immediately tell them, I know the truth about 9/11, but a good way is to ask questions, ask open-ended questions, and lead them into a dialogue and discussion about it.
Healing comes through facing the truth, experiencing it, allowing the feelings to come in. So if there are feelings of fear that perhaps these events were caused by something we haven't thought about yet, dark elements within our society, for example, we'll let that come in and explore it. Let the light shine on whatever happened. This will be the most healing process. The German...
Folks, please don't leave yet. We have announcements.
We have a long time, and thank you for coming. Please sign the petition if you haven't already signed it. Anyone can sign it at ae911truth.org and support the work. You can donate to our cause here at the corner table. It helps us to provide more. We have a fellowship here, and we want to build on it. Don't let this stop here. We need to continue building on Arizona 9/11 Truth, and we are all a part of it. So if you go to Machias, we'll see you there. Support the work on AE911 Truth, and we will let you know about future actions, and we hope that we continue to have this kind of turnout and participation. We can actually make changes. So we have a lot of hope. We're peaceful, nonviolent, and we're very happy you were here, Russell. Thank you. Thank you, folks.
You're from Tucson, Dr.
Mm-hmm.